The most famous photo of Tiger 323 does not show how it fought. After Berlin surrendered on 2nd of May 1945, the wreck sat in the Tiergarten as a Red Army photo backdrop. Gun swung rearwards, hull nosed among the linden trees beside the Brandenburg Gate, before it disappeared from the city. The combat last stand was already over. What the cameras froze was the humiliation afterward. And if you go today, the place is still there. The road alignment, the Tiergarten edge, and the tree-lined corridor, though no record proves that each individual tree in the photograph survived. The wreck is widely identified as Tiger 323, a Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger I associated with Panzer-Division Müncheberg. That identification rests on the vehicle's visible features, its location, and Müncheberg's presence in central Berlin during the final battle. The turret number isn't cleanly legible in the surviving photographs, and no published German loss report has surfaced naming this exact hull at the Brandenburg Gate. Tiger 323 is the strongest identification, not an archival certainty. That distinction keeps the story honest. We are following one identifiable wreck through a few compressed weeks in 1945, not using a generic Tiger as an excuse to retell the Battle of Berlin. Specialist reconstructions place the Tiger's final operational period between 28th of April and the 1st of May in the government district around the Reichstag and Königsplatz. One reconstruction places it at the northeastern corner of Königsplatz, on the Reichstag side, covering approaches from the Moltke Bridge. Another places its abandonment during the night of 30th April and the 1st of May, after fuel and ammunition were exhausted. Other accounts date the loss to 1st of May or connect it loosely to the surrender on the 2nd of May. No surviving crew testimony establishes whether its crew scuttled it, whether it was immobilized by damage, or whether it simply ran out of fuel and ammunition. No Soviet battlefield report identifies its exact final combat coordinates. The gap matters because the tank's most famous photographed position may not be the place where its crew made their last tactical decision. Berlin's military surrender supplies the firm date. General der Artillerie Helmuth Weidling, commander of the Berlin defense area, ordered resistance to cease on 2nd of May 1945. The Red Army assault had begun on 16th April. By the morning of 2nd of May, organized German resistance inside the capital had ended, even though disorder and isolated violence didn't vanish at the same instant from every street. The known Soviet photographs of Tiger 323 are attributed to 2nd of May or the immediate aftermath. In them, the Tiger is inert. Soviet soldiers stand beside its hull, sit on it, and climb across its armor. There is no visible crew, no defensive posture, and no sign that the tank is still part of an active German line. Those details make the photographs occupation-era documents, even if the exact hour and photographer remain unknown. This is the central correction. The image records a defeated machine after the battle for the city had ended, not a Tiger caught at the instant it fired its final round. The Brandenburg Gate gives that photograph its force. Built between 1788 and 1791 as a Prussian city gate, it had become one of Berlin's clearest symbols of state authority and military prestige. Napoleon used it for a triumphal entry after defeating Prussia in 1806. When the quadriga returned after Napoleon's defeat, the gate acquired an even stronger association with Prussian victory. By May 1945, it stood damaged but upright beside a capital devastated by the regime that had launched a war across Europe. A knocked-out German heavy tank near that monument was more than roadside debris. It was a visual statement made by circumstance. The feared weapon was dead in front of the defeated state's most recognizable gate. The Soviet soldiers in the photographs don't need to be treated as actors in a formal propaganda production for the symbolism to be clear. No surviving order says Tiger 323 was placed there for official photography. No caption identifies a photographer, a camera unit, or a negative number. Yet the stills show soldiers using the abandoned tank as a setting for victory portraits. The wreck had become a platform, a seat, and a proof of survival. That is why trophy photograph works better than claims of carefully directed staging. The men had fought through Berlin, reached the government district, and found a German Tiger I abandoned beside the gate. Their relaxed poses show the tank's military role had ended. The object remained dangerous in memory, but it no longer controlled the ground around it. Tiger 323's physical design made the image more potent. A Tiger I carried the 8.8 cm KWK 36 L56 gun, the same basic caliber that had given German anti-aircraft and anti-tank weapons their fearsome reputation. The gun barrel measured 4.928 meters. Nearly 5 meters of steel projected forward of the turret when the gun faced ahead, longer than a large family car is wide. A Tiger I's combat weight was roughly 54 to 56 tons, depending on configuration. That is the weight of a loaded city bus concentrated on tracks, road wheels, and a hull less than 4 meters wide. In open country, the vehicle's 360-degree turret traverse and long gun created a wide field of fire. At the Tiergarten edge, those same dimensions create the key problem in the photographs. The turret is turned substantially rearward relative to the hull. The long barrel points back through, or along, the tree-lined setting beside the road. The hull sits close to the Tiergarten trees rather than squarely within an obvious open firing lane. The gun isn't simply facing sideways toward a building corner. It's directed toward the rear of the vehicle in constrained space. A rearward turret alone does not prove post-war handling. Tanks can turn their guns to cover a rear threat. A crew withdrawing under pressure might have faced the turret backward while the hull moved or reversed. A disabled vehicle can be abandoned with the gun pointing in any direction. Blast damage, a jammed turret ring, or a last German crew action remain possible explanations. But the tree line changes the reading. A 4.928-meter barrel swings through a broad arc whenever the turret traverses. With mature trunks, branches, debris, and the road verge close to the hull, that gun would have had an awkward and constrained movement envelope. The photographs don't provide a measured survey of 1945 tree spacing, trunk diameter, hull distance, or barrel clearance. We can't say a particular trunk physically blocked a particular traverse angle. What the photographs do show is a heavy tank with its main armament pointed rearward among trees, close to the edge of a major avenue. The strongest reading isn't that the position was physically impossible in combat. It's that the pose was tactically unsuitable for an intentional, sustained fighting position. A conventional fighting sighting would normally seek a clear approach, room to traverse, and a gun arc covering a likely enemy route. Tiger 323 appears instead to have its gun obstructed or limited by the vegetation behind and beside it, while the broad avenue lies nearby. That mismatch is the first clue that the famous pose belongs to the wreck's afterlife rather than to its most important combat moment. The technical details of the Tiger make one explanation plausible. Its turret had powered traverse, linked through a hydraulic system driven by the tank's mechanical arrangements. It also had manual traverse. If the turret ring, gears, and hand mechanisms remained usable, the gunner and commander could rotate the turret without engine power. Technical reconstructions estimate that a full 360-degree manual rotation required roughly 720 turns of the gunner's wheel, or about 595 turns of the commander's wheel. That is slow, exhausting work. It's also mechanically possible. A disabled Tiger didn't need to be driven, fueled, or electrically powered for men inside to move the turret if the ring had not been bent, jammed, or damaged beyond use. This does not establish that Soviet personnel turned Tiger 323's turret. No surviving engineer report says that a recovery party entered the tank, released a traverse lock, or rotated the gun. No photograph shows a Soviet soldier at the hand wheels. No examination of the turret ring survives. The technical record proves capability, not the event. Yet capability matters because it removes one easy objection. The turret didn't have to remain frozen in whatever position the German crew left it. If Soviet inspection personnel found the interior accessible and the mechanism intact, they could have moved it during examination or preparation for recovery. The photographs can't tell us whether they did. They only show a final pose that is entirely compatible with post-battle handling. The second explanation concerns the hull itself. Tiger 323 is generally placed near the eastern end of Charlottenburger Chaussee, the broad avenue now called Strasse des 17. Juni on the Tiergarten side of the Brandenburg Gate. It wasn't on Unter den Linden, which begins on the opposite side of the gate to the east. That location error appears in general summaries, but the photograph setting belongs west and northwest of the monument. Charlottenburger Chaussee wasn't a small side road. It was one of Berlin's major east-west routes through the Tiergarten. On the 21st of July 1945, British forces held their victory parade on the same avenue. The parade confirmed the road's importance in the occupation city only 11 weeks after Berlin's surrender. A mid-50-ton Tiger blocking a major route near the Brandenburg Gate would have mattered immediately. Berlin's streets were already crowded with rubble, wrecked vehicles, carts, supply columns, troops, civilians, and damaged infrastructure. Soviet forces needed roads for movement, food, medical evacuation, liaison, and the administrative occupation of a city of millions. Moving a Tiger any substantial distance was difficult. German recovery practice shows the scale of the problem. The Tank Museum notes that crews often used 2, sometimes 3, 18-ton Farmo half-tracks coupled together to recover a Tiger. The Tiger's own manuals treated recovery as a specialised task involving tow bars, ropes, hooks, winches, cleared tracks and careful route management. But a complete recovery to a depot isn't the same operation as a short drag off a carriageway. Pulling a disabled tank several metres toward a verge or tree line would have been easier than towing it across a ruined city, and it would have opened the road while leaving the tank available for later inspection. That is the logic behind the short drag theory. A Soviet recovery or engineer party may have shifted the hull from a usable roadway toward the Tiergarten trees, producing the exact roadside scene preserved in the photographs. Hull tucked near the verge, gun rearward, gate visible nearby, soldiers able to climb onto the wreck without standing in traffic. There is no Soviet towing order for Tiger 323. No cable appears in the known images. No track marks, recovery vehicle, towing direction, crew name, or measured distance has been documented. The theory remains an operational reconstruction derived from road geography, the tank's final visible position, and the ordinary need to clear a major avenue. The alternative remains possible. Tiger 323 might have stopped beside the trees during its final combat phase. A desperate German crew could have taken cover near the Tiergarten edge, covered a rear threat, suffered mechanical failure, or been forced out of the vehicle where it stood. Berlin's final battle produced strange positions because streets were cratered, bridges were destroyed, infantry was everywhere, and the German command structure was collapsing. But the photograph makes that explanation less satisfying. The hull isn't visibly centred in a clear firing lane. The gun isn't obviously covering an open approach. The long barrel is close to trees. Soviet soldiers are already treating the wreck as secure ground. The scene makes more sense as a post-battle roadside arrangement, whether that meant a short drag, a rotated turret, or simply the final consequences of abandonment. The evidence supports a careful verdict. Tiger 323's famous pose almost certainly does not record a deliberate final combat sighting. It more likely reflects the condition of an abandoned wreck after the surrender, probably altered at least by the practical realities of inspection and traffic clearance. That reading changes the meaning of the photographs. They aren't images of German armour making a final stand before the Brandenburg Gate. They are images of a German heavy tank after the Soviet victory had converted it from a weapon into an object. The phrase trophy can sound cold when attached to human beings who had survived the Battle of Berlin. These portraits should be read as human victory documents. The men around Tiger 323 had crossed the Oder, fought through the city, and reached the centre of the German capital. The photographs show relief, pride, fatigue, and ownership of a place that had cost the Red Army enormously. The Tiergarten itself had been devastated. By 1945, the park had been damaged by bombardment and stripped of timber during the final months of war. Berlin's residents needed fuel. The avenues that had framed imperial ceremonies became routes through ruins. In that setting, a Tiger I among the trees could look less like a supreme weapon than a carcass left behind by a defeated army. The name Tiergarten means animal garden. The wordplay is tempting, a tiger dead among the trees. But the real force comes from the scale of reversal. Germany built the Tiger as a heavy tank for a war of conquest. By 2 May 1945, this Tiger was being used as furniture for photographs taken by soldiers of the army that had defeated Nazi Germany in Berlin. The Tiger photographs should also be kept separate from another famous image made that day. Yevgeny Kalday's raising a flag over the Reichstag shows Soviet soldiers placing a flag on the Reichstag roof. It's a different location, a different subject, and a different photographic history. Its later staging and editing debates don't explain Tiger 323, which was photographed at ground level on the Tiergarten side of the Brandenburg Gate. Tiger 323's story is more geographically modest and in some ways more unsettling. It's about a road, a tree line, a wreck, and the short interval in which a battlefield object became a public symbol before it vanished. The timeline after 2 May is thin but bounded. From Berlin's surrender until early July, the city remained under Soviet control before the Western Allies moved into their assigned sectors. The United States was scheduled to assume control of its Berlin sector at midnight on 4 July 1945. British troops entered Berlin in July. On 21 July, British forces marched in their victory parade along Charlottenburger Chaussee. Tiger 323, therefore, had a Soviet-only afterlife, somewhere between a few days and roughly 2 months. The photographs prove that it stood near the gate after the surrender. They don't tell us whether it remained there for hours, days, or weeks. There is no confirmed last sighting, no first confirmed absence, and no published recovery diary tied to the tank. No known American or British occupation-era photograph shows soldiers posing on Tiger 323. That absence isn't proof that no such image exists. A photograph may remain in an unindexed archive, a private album, or a collection whose caption identifies only Berlin. Western troops may have passed the site without stopping. Absence in a surviving photo trail is still weaker evidence than a dated recovery order. But the absence has some weight when placed beside what came before. Tiger 323 had already attracted Soviet photographers near one of Europe's most photographed monuments. Its position was visible and symbolically obvious. If it had remained near the gate into the period of American and British access, it would have been an attractive subject for Allied occupation photographs as well. The stronger inference is that it had been removed before, or by, the early July transition. The evidence can't provide a day. It can't identify the unit that moved it. It can only place the disappearance inside a narrowing window after 2 May and before the later occupation photography becomes visible. What happened after removal is also incomplete. Modern accounts commonly reconstruct a sequence in which Soviet recovery teams removed the Tiger, sent it to a collection point, stripped useful components, and scrapped the remaining hull. That sequence is plausible. A heavy German tank in the center of an occupied capital was a source of technical information, usable metal, and an obstruction that couldn't remain indefinitely beside a major route. The problem is documentation. No supplied record identifies a Soviet recovery formation for Tiger 323. No collection yard inventory lists its chassis. No technical report describes its engine, transmission, gun, armor, or turret after recovery. No scrapyard document names the tank. No furnace, rail shipment, or cutting yard can be tied to this hull. We can't honestly narrate a recovery crew arriving on a specific morning, attaching a cable, and hauling Tiger 323 away. The record does not permit that scene. What can be said is that Tiger 323 does not appear in listings of surviving Tiger I tanks, and no museum collection traces its provenance to this wreck. Surviving Tiger I examples are rare and dispersed. One stands at the Tank Museum in Bovington. Others survive in France, Russia, the United States, private collections, or reconstruction projects assembled from original wreck components. None is the Tiergarten Tiger. That leaves recovery, stripping, and scrap as the leading explanation for its disappearance. The hull may have been temporarily stored, locally dismantled, technically inspected, or moved through several stages before being cut apart. The exact route is unknown. The result isn't. The tank is gone. The speed of that disappearance is striking. Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. The conflict lasted almost 4 years. Tiger 323's visible afterlife may have lasted less than 2 months, from Berlin's surrender on 2 May to the arrival of Western occupation forces in July. A machine that weighed more than 50 tons became one of Berlin's best-known wrecks, then slipped out of the physical record. The war machine didn't become a preserved relic because it was important. It was eliminated because, in 1945, it was material. That loss can produce a collector's regret, but the feeling needs discipline. Tiger 323 wasn't an innocent artifact. It was a weapon of Nazi Germany, built for a war that destroyed cities, occupied countries, murdered civilians, and inflicted catastrophe across Europe and the Soviet Union. The Soviet soldiers photographed on its hull weren't desecrating a neutral museum object. They were standing on the defeated machinery of an invading enemy. Still, its disappearance leaves historians dependent on photographs. The images preserve the outer details, early pattern road wheels, the broad hull, the rearward turret, the damaged surfaces, the 8.8 centimeter gun, the Soviet uniforms, the trees, and the battered Brandenburg Gate. They can't preserve the interior condition of the vehicle, the state of its turret ring, the damage beneath the armor, or the decisions made after the camera shutter closed. Every surviving photograph carries more weight because the steel didn't survive with it. The geography, however, has survived more faithfully than the object. Specialist reconstructions place the wreck roughly 100 meters northwest of the Brandenburg Gate, near the eastern end of Charlottenburger Chaussee, now Strasse des 17th Juni. One modelling source coordinate, 52.517174, 13.374993, has circulated online, but it isn't an institutional survey or an archaeological fix. It should be treated as a useful approximation, not a point precise enough to place a boot heel. The practical orientation is clearer. Stand on the Tiergarten side of the Brandenburg Gate. Move west or northwest along the north side of Strasse des 17th Juni, where the broad avenue meets the park edge. The gate remains to the east. The road still drives through the Tiergarten. The trees still shape the boundary between boulevard and park. The modern avenue isn't the avenue of May 1945. Berlin rebuilt pavements, altered traffic patterns, restored the gate, divided the city during the Cold War, and reunited it after 1990. Trees were damaged, removed, replanted, and allowed to grow across 8 decades. Claims that the exact individual linden trunks in the tiger photographs remain alive today go beyond the evidence. The continuity is broader and more defensible. The photographed landscape still makes sense. The gate remains the visual anchor. The road still runs east-west. The Tiergarten still begins at the avenue edge. A tree-lined corridor still interrupts sightlines in the same general way that it did when Tiger 323 lay there. That surviving geography allows a visitor to understand something a cropped photograph hides. The tank wasn't deep in a forest. It lay beside one of Berlin's principal ceremonial and traffic routes, at the threshold between monumental city space and parkland. The combination of road, trees and gate is why the image feels so strange. The wreck had become both obstruction and monument. A short walk west along Strasse des 17th Juni leads to the Soviet War Memorial in the Tiergarten. It was unveiled on the 11th of November 1945, 6 months after Berlin's surrender. The memorial stands on the north side of the avenue and commemorates Soviet soldiers killed in the battle for Berlin. Its material is part of the story. The memorial incorporated stone taken from destroyed Nazi government buildings, including the Reich Chancellery. A bronze Soviet soldier stands above the central structure. 2 T-34 tanks flank the memorial. In 1945, the memorial was erected in a landscape still filled with ruins, stripped trees, and battlefield debris. The memorial's position later became politically unusual. It stood in the British sector of Berlin during the Cold War, but Soviet honor guards were permitted access. Today, Berlin maintains it as a burial ground and memorial. It remains close enough to the Brandenburg Gate that the Tiger 323 location and the T-34s can be understood as parts of the same walk. The 2 T-34s aren't documented participants in Tiger 323's final action. No evidence says either tank encountered it, passed it, photographed it, or helped recover it. They shouldn't be turned into props for a false duel between 1 German Tiger and 2 preserved Soviet tanks. Their value lies elsewhere. They are physical memorial vehicles in a landscape where Tiger 323 no longer exists. The Soviet tanks remain painted, maintained, and publicly visible beside a monument to the army that captured Berlin. The German Tiger that became a photographic symbol of defeat survives only as black and white evidence and a probable roadside location. That contrast isn't mysterious. Memorials preserve selected objects. Victors choose what is displayed, what is buried, what is named, and what becomes public memory. Enemy wrecks are more likely to be examined, dismantled, recycled, or simply cleared away. The T-34s at the Tiergarten Memorial don't merely represent tanks. They mark whose army remained in Berlin after the fighting ended. Tiger 323's afterlife ran in the opposite direction. Its wartime purpose ended in the final days of April or the first days of May. By 2nd of May, it was a backdrop for Red Army portraits. At some point before the Western occupation of Berlin became visible in July, it was likely removed. The vehicle that had been heavy enough to require specialist recovery became a missing object. The final answer has to keep its uncertainty visible. The wreck near the Brandenburg Gate is widely identified as Müncheberg Tiger 323. Soviet photographs show it abandoned after Berlin surrendered on 2nd May 1945. The gun is turned rearward. The hull is close to the Tiergarten trees and off the most obvious open carriageway. Those facts are visible. The next steps are inference. A Tiger I turret could be moved manually if its gears and ring remained intact. That makes post-battle turret rotation possible. A mid-50-ton wreck obstructing Charlottenburger Chaussee would have created a practical reason to drag it toward the verge. That makes a short relocation highly plausible. Neither action is directly recorded for Tiger III. The photographs therefore don't reveal a final German firing position. They reveal a post-surrender wreck in a position shaped, at minimum, by abandonment and, most likely, by the handling needs of a victorious army occupying a ruined capital. The last stand had already ended when the cameras arrived. What remains at the Brandenburg Gate isn't the Tiger. It's the road beside which it lay, the Tiergarten edge that confined its long gun, and a tree-lined landscape that still lets the photograph be read against the ground. A short walk away, 2 Soviet T-34s stand beside the memorial unveiled on 11th of November 1945, while Tiger III survives only in images of Red Army soldiers sitting on its hull beneath the battered gate.